So the Mishnah, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from one. Nothing is off shore of a Caleb and Ishtabu. So the Mishnah said that a shore, an ox falls into the pit and it's carrying stuff, and the things that it's carrying broke. Then the owner of the pit is responsible for damage to the animal, the shore, but not the kalim, because war doesn't pay for kalim. Masnisi lo Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says this Mishnah does not go according to Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Machayev on Miskei Kalim b'bar. Rabbi Yehuda says no. A bor is responsible for damage to kalim, to utensils. My Talmud Rabbanan. What's the reason that our Mishnah says bor is not responsible for damage to kalim? The Amar Kra, and Nafal Shalom Torah describes the bor. It says. It says an ox or a donkey falls there. That's referring to so what do we derive from that? Shore of a lo adam. So the Torah is being specific. It says shore, an ox. That excludes people, or people that fall into a pit you're not responsible for. They should be watching where they're going, I guess. And chamor of a lo kalim. And it specifies chamor, and the other kind of animal, the donkey, to exclude kalim. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda. So what does Rabbi Yehuda do with that? L'rabos is a kalim. It says shor o chamor, ox or donkey. So the word or includes something extra, and that would be kalim. Rabbanan. So what do the rabbis say about that? What's the word or for? Mivayle l'chalik. You need the word or o in Hebrew. That you would, if it said shor v'chamor, an ox and a donkey fall into the pit, you think, oh, when are you responsible for damages? If both an ox and a donkey fall into the pit, only an ox or only a donkey, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? But what they're saying is that the Torah is just using language, right? An ox or a donkey. It's a necessary conjunction in the verse, and you can't derive anything extra from it. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda say to that? L'chalek me v'nafal nafka. V'nafal is in the singular. An ox or donkey fell into it in the singular and not the plural. So you don't need the word rabbanan. Well, the rabbis, isn't it in the singular? So obviously you don't need. Obviously, it's either a donkey or an ox. Why do you need the word or? V'nafal tu v'mashma. They don't read it that way. They think that in the context, using singular is an inclusive term that could include many animals that fall in. Therefore, you need the word or, and therefore everybody has a leg to stand on in this dispute about whether the Torah excludes kalim from the damage to kalim being the responsibility of the owner of the bor. Okay, so the Gemara is going further. Ema v'nafal klal shor v'chamor prat klalu prat ein b'klal mashavi prat. Why don't we use the following hermeneutic principle? V'nafal could mean anything, right? Something falls, right? So that's a general term. It falls right into a pit. That could be anything. It's a general term. Shor v'chamor prat, and then it specifies what falls in an ox or a donkey, klal prat. So then we have the hermeneutical principle of a rule followed by a detail. And klal mashav prat. So then that we usually understand to mean that only things like the detail, or only things that are detailed are included in the general, and not anything else. Shor v'chamor in midechrin lo. So, like, maybe it's only referring to shor and chamora. Maybe only oxen and donkeys are the responsibility of the owner of the pit, and if a dog or some other animal or any other thing falls in there, it's not responsible. Whereas it's amrei, so you could say, "Val habar yishalim chazer klal," that there is a following rule. So this is not just a rule and a detail; it's a rule, details, and then summarized by a rule again. And the rule is Balabar Yishalayim, the owner of the pit shall pay for anything, right? So this is generalization again. So klal probably klal yatadan el ke'ein haprat. Then in that case, if you have that construction, then you understand that the Torah is talking about anything that's like those things that it's giving examples, not only specifics, but examples. So hold on one sec, please. Okay, we still there? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So now we're talking about a cloud or private cloud. So and what are the essential natures? What is the essential element of the detailed shor v'chamor that we apply to a general class? So so then that you can include any other thing like an ox or donkey, meaning any other living being, any animal. Why do you want to do that? Maybe the klal is things that if it's an avela, if it's a dead body, a carcass, and it then um, it makes a person tame by touching it or carrying it. So maybe the rule includes only those things, like a shor or so that would exclude birds, right? Um, says in Cain, Rachmana Chad Prata. Then the Torah doesn't need to write ox and ox or donkey, right? By saying both of them, we're going to say anything that's similar the to the examples of Shor Hamor in only one aspect. Okay, and um, so in other words, we're the Torah is. I mean, this is not intuitive, but what we're saying is the Torah is narrowing, or sorry, actually broadening really the what we're to take from the example, that is being alive, and not a more restrictive example of this halachic detail about whether it becomes tamei b'mando masa. So Mara says, I don't like that explanation. Hey, you're saying you could have only written ox, or you could have only written donkey. Which one? Because of shar, and if that wouldn't suffice because of the following. If the Torah had written shar, what's different between ox and donkey? An ox can be a sacrifice. A donkey cannot. It's not a kosher animal. And if the therefore, all right, so write donkey, right? Write donkey as well. But what if it only wrote donkey? How about mina? B'chora in shein kodesh b'chora in shein kodesh b'chora lo. You know why the Torah says a donkey? Because the only, again, like it seems ridiculous to apply these to damages, but the only damage you're responsible for is that of an animal which can become kadosh, or it becomes kadosh by birth, which is only a donkey. Or well, no, I would say animals that are eligible for before, like the type of animal for which you get a before, like a donkey, right? Not an ox. So so then you still wouldn't know a bird because birds aren't included in the sorry, not an ox, but not a bird, right? So you still wouldn't know that birds are included, and the Torah, and with our, and we do understand that birds are included because we're using the you're ending up with the any living thing like an ox or a donkey. That's why the Torah has to say ox or donkey, so you wouldn't trip up and restrict the class too much. Ella Amar Krava Hamesielo. So um, so we're still back to the question of, since it's a cloud part of cloud, maybe it should only be ox and a donkey. So that's why we say Bahamesielo. In the end, we say the owner of the pit has to pay and keep the carcass called Devar. Anything. This indicates that anything that can die. Right. So this is how we know what to extrapolate from Shor Hamor, because we're probably dealing with something that can end up as a dead body. Therefore,
Job, I can barely hear you.
Sorry?
I can barely hear you.
You can barely hear me.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I could also barely hear you. You're very low.
I can barely hear you too. Wait a second.
That's better.
That's better?
Yes.
I'll put this closer to me. Oh, now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Bein Rabbanim dekama Mati Lulakalim, or Bein Rabbi Yehuda dekama Rabbi Lulakalim. So regardless of whether Bor is responsible for kalim, for damage to kalim, regardless of whether you're talking about Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbanan, kalim b'nei misanin, they don't, they can't die, right? So like. So if this is what we end up with, so the rabbis don't need anything special to exclude kalim, because we already know the kalim don't die; they're not alive. And Rabbi Yehuda, how can he include? How can he figure that shor v'chamor include kalim if kalim don't die? Right? If that's our hook, if that's our final criteria, then you don't need the other ones to include or exclude kalim. So Gemara says, Amrei Shirasan Zugmisasan. Kalim can die. They die. In other words, we use a different word for kalim. They get broken, but that's their death, as it were. They cease to be. All right. Well, Rav the Amar Bar Shachiva of Torah. What about Rav? He says, we saw yesterday that what is the nature of the damage caused by a boar that you're responsible for? It's the noxious air that kills the living being. Guess what? Kalim, even though they may die by being broken, they don't die by inhaling noxious air, because they don't inhale, right? So what kind of damage are we talking about? Because kalim cannot be in that class of things that get damaged by a boar, by the air of a boar. All right, you could say b'chadte. Actually, yes, you could be talking about new vessels. Then mipake mehavla, that they can. It's like still new, it's still cooling from the kiln, and somehow the noxious air in the pit, or maybe it's the fact that the air is colder or warmer, I don't know, kind of gets into it and weakens the structure of the vessel so that it breaks. Okay, seems a little far-fetched, but that's where we are. Okay. Now, so we just wanted to say that what's the final criteria of a bore? It's that the thing damaged in it leaves something dead, right? Something dead or broken. But we already used that verse for something else. If you have a shore, an ox that was hekdesh but is no longer offerable on the mizbeach, it fell into a pit. Potter, there's no liability. Because you can't keep the carcass. It's hekdesh. right? But Mishame Shalom, it's only if you can keep the carcass. So we're already using that phrase. He keeps the dead body to tell us about Sharp Sulayim with Dashim, that it's not included in the bar. So how can you use it again to tell you that it's you're only responsible for something that can die? El Amakra Kesef Yashiv Li Bala. So we're going to take another. We're going to abandon the idea of using that keep the carcass to prove that it has to be something as a carcass, and use the following verse: Kesef Yashiv Li Bala. The owner of the pit has to return the money to the damaged party. The Ramos called the East Laban. That implies that there's an owner of the damaged thing, which would exclude Sulayim Dashim. Yahakis Gemara says if that's so, I feel like hailing the other. So I'd say that even Kalim have an owner. A person can have an owner, for example, if he's a slave, right? So maybe those should be included in damage of the pit, but we don't say that. So how can you? So why would you use this pasuk? Amarkra, because then the Torah excludes that shor v'lo adam, chamor v'lo kalim. So that's how we end up, according to the rabbis, using this shor and chamor to exclude people and kalim that get damaged in the bar. Well, Rabbi Yehuda, the Kamma Lulu kalim. Well, okay, that's fine according to the rabbis. But about Rabbi Yehuda, he says you do pay damages for kalim. Bishlama shor might let be'ada. Okay, so shor can exclude people. Ela chamor might pay. The rabbis can say that the use of the specific donkey excludes kalim, but Rabbi Yehuda thinks that we do include kalim. So what do you use? Why does the Torah say shor v'chamor, shor o chamor? Ela marava chamor debor. Rabbi Yehuda. 1 second. Yeah, so the Gemara says actually it's a problem. Chamor debor, Rabbi Yehuda. So the fact that the Torah says chamor is a problem for Rabbi Yehuda because he doesn't exclude anything from chamor, and also said the Aveda. When the Torah uses as an example of something that is lost property, it uses the example set. Livrei kol kasha. According to everybody, like nobody can satisfactorily explain what the Torah is doing, giving a specific example. There, kasha. These are problems. We don't have the explanation. So, kind of leaving that open, but it seems like this disproves Rabbi Yehuda because, at least in the case of Sad, like nobody is arguing about it. But this would seem to be dispositive towards the Rabbah. Okay, the Gemara doesn't take that up. Mishnah said if an ox, which is deaf mute, or insane, or of minority age, you are liable for that. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? Are we referring to the owners of the ox? So high shor shall be half. So, what are you saying? You're saying that the ox of an insane person is you're liable for that. So does that imply that if the owner is not insane, you're not liable? Gemara's going to just throw away this question, but that's the initial question. Shor shehu cheresh. Shor shehu shota, shor shehu kata. No, we're not talking about the owner. We're talking about the ox itself. But the ox itself is deaf, mute, or insane, or a minority age. You are responsible for that. So then we could ask the same question: so what? A smart ox, like a normal ox, does that imply that you're not responsible for that? Here you love the life. No, you're not understanding. You can't. That's not what the Mishnah means to imply. It's the construction called lomi baya. Like not only this, lomi baya sharshu pikech the chayav not only is a regular smart ox, sane ox you're responsible for. But even an insane ox or deaf ox or young ox, you might say that why it fell into the pit. It's not my fault for digging the pit. It's because the shor is insane, right? It's the ox. So believe shor, maybe we were thinking about it. So Kamash, no, you dug the pit. You are responsible even for crazy ox. I only got up to Dina, so last I said, Tanya, Nafal Socho Bardas Potter. If a regular, like a sane person, someone who is has agency, falls into the pit, the owner is exempt. My love, Shor Bardas. So what are we talking? Aren't we talking about a normal ox? I'm really low. Oh, then we're talking to a normal person, right? Only after other Badas who the Potter. So halav Badas who the chayev. So what are you telling me? Again, the same kind of construction that you're only responsible for people, normal people who wandered into the pit, but not crazy people. Sure, below anapsi. It's like why would you be chayav at all for a person, right? So elamai bendas, min bendas. So now we're going to revise. We're not talking about crazy versus non-crazy oxen. We're talking about an intelligent species. Okay. So we're not distinguishing between different kinds of people. We're saying people are a category. You're not responsible, you're pater for people, intelligent beings, which is another way of saying people, but you are responsible for oxen. But now we have another source that says shor ben das, an ox that is sane, right? That has agency, as it were. So you can't interpret that as being human. It's definitely specifically referring to an ox and distinguishing between bendas and not bendas. Rava answers, we're talking about when are you liable for an ox only when it is insane or too young or deaf mute. But a regular ox falls into the pit, you're exempt, right? My tama, why? Because the ox should watch where it's going, just like people, right? It should be watching where it's going. I dug a pit. It's not my fault if an ox, doesn't watch where it's going. But I know that there are oxen that don't watch where they're going because they are deaf mutes or too young or whatever. Those I'm responsible for. And we also have a supporting brisa. If an ox that is deaf mute, insane, of minor age, or blind, or walking at night, right? For all those, you're responsible. So from that, you can definitely speak right? By the fact that it includes night, that seems to make it clear that we're talking about like you're responsible for oxen that can't be expected to look out for themselves. But so, for example, one that's walking at night, right? That's the only reasonable explanation for why nighttime would be different. But an ox that should be able to watch out for itself, you're not responsible for as the owner of the boar. Okay, next Mishnah. Whether an ox or any other animal, they're the same for falling into a pit, right? Could be an ox, could be a cow, could be I was going to say, whatever, a sheep, whatever. Then in what other cases does shor represent the class of other animals? La frashas har Sinai, the command given at Mount Sinai before the revelation that no animals should approach, no people or animals should approach the Har Sinai. So there it actually doesn't use the word shor, it uses the word behema, but what the Mishnah apparently is getting at is that it's an inclusive term meaning any living being, right? You keep your birds away from there too. And if you steal, not only if you steal an ox, but if you steal anything, you have to pay, and you're caught, you have to pay back double. Finding a lost object, not only a shor, but any animal. Liprika, you have a mitzvah to help somebody unload his animal, not just an ox, but any animal. Lachasima, you have a mitzvah to not muzzle an ox while it's working, while it's plowing your field. So that applies to any animal. Likulayim. There's two kinds of kilayim here, actually. Kilayim is either plowing with two mixed species or crossbreeding two species. It does not only apply to a shore, it applies to any animal. Ula Shabbos, and your animals are not permitted to work on Shabbos. That includes not only a shore, but also any animal. All of these things applies to both, to all domestic animals. So behema is taken to mean a domestic animal. And it also includes undomesticated animals or birds. So why in all of these cases is the Torah specific? The Torah is just talking about the usual case. Usually, what kind of animal do you use to plow? You use an ox. Usually, what kind of animal gets lost? I don't know, whatever, domestic animals, but whatever. The Torah is just not specific, not trying to be specific, but Divar Chosav Bahova is just using a common example, but really it applies to the whole class of animals. So now the Gemara is going to analyze each one of these things or find sources. And if you love somewhere that there's, if any animal is subject to repayment of damages, it falls into a pit because because it says right there that the money has to be returned to the owner. Called Yislebalim Kadamar. Like we said in the previous Mishnah, in the previous section of Gemara, if it has an owner, then so not just an ox or a donkey, but any animal that can be owned. What's the source for the equivalence regarding staying away from Mount Sinai at the Revelation? The Torah says, stay away from the mountain because whether animal or man, that person shall not live if he approaches the mountain. And when you use the word behema, which in Rabbinic Hebrew or in the Mishnah is usually taken to mean domesticated animal, here we're stating that behema is a broader term which includes both domesticated and non-domesticated animals. And im l'rabos says whether a man or a beast, whether the word im includes birds as well. Okay, and those are all living things. Yes, insects didn't count. What about for paying the double what you stole if you're caught? We've seen that elsewhere, and the Gemara is actually going to cover that later on Samach Beis. I'll call Dvar Pesha because it says because it's a klal u'prat. I'll call Dvar Pesha for anything that you sin with and by stealing. That's a klal. It's a generalization. So kol dvar pshia means anything that that you're not supposed to steal, and you do steal, you pay double. So you were including everything, not just a shore, not just an animal, not just a living thing, actually, but any item of value. So where do we know the general rule applies for Hashavas Aveda? Because the Torah says, like this is the rule for his ox and his donkey, but it also says anything that your fellow loses, you're responsible for returning it to him if you find it. Leprika, what about unloading an animal? Yalav chamor mishabbos. That we get from Shabbos. So we'll see Shabbos in a minute, but there's a linkage by using the word chamor between helping to unload an animal and keeping Shabbos. And so we'll see the Shabbos source in a minute here, but that would also be applied to the mitzvah of prika. L'chasima, what about not muzzling your animal when it's plowing? Yalif shar mishabbos. Again, we're going to derive that from Shabbos. L'kilayim, what about the mixing of breeds? Ikalayim l'charisha. So there's two kinds, like I said. So if we're talking about plowing with two kinds of animals, if that's what we're talking about, and the Torah says you can't shor v'chamor yachdav, right? You can't, I can't remember the beginning of the phrase, but you can't plow with an ox and a donkey. How do you know any other kind of animal, mixed breeds of animals? Yalif shor shor mishabbos. Again, we learn from Shabbos. And the other kind of kilayim of mixed breeding, ikalayim harba, yalif behemtecha behemtecha mishabbos. We also learn that from Shabbos. Okay, so we've got a lot riding on how we know that none of your animals can work on Shabbos, not just prohibiting the shor and chamor. The Gabi Shabbos Minon. Where do we get? What's the source for this idea about Shabbos? The Tanya, we have a brayso. Yossi Omer Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yossi says the name Rabbi Shmuel, but Dibros Rishonos Namar. In the first 10 commandments, it says Av the Chavayim Asna V'Hemtecha. Right? Who has to rest on Shabbos? You, your family, your slaves, and your animals. Right? And in the second version of the 10 Commandments in Dvarim, it says V'sharchava chamarcha v'chol behemtecha. Your ox and your donkey and all your animals. Like, why in the second version is it specifying your ox and your donkey and all your animals? It could just say all your animals, and that includes your ox and your donkey, right? Why did the Torah pick them out and specify them as well? To tell you, so by giving specific examples, it's things like the specific examples, undomesticated animals and birds. Afkol chayv of keyosavan. And we'll see in a minute why we're being including here. So ema behema de dibros rishonos klal sharcha hamarcha de dibros achronos prat. Well, why don't you take the following approach? Maybe this is a klal uprat situation. So usually we have klal uprat in the same sentence, right? But here we're like spanning two books, right? We're saying the first dibro, the first set of 10, the first commandments, the first set of the commandments, it says a klal, behema, right? A general rule, a larger class, right? Animals. And then in the second version, it says shorcha v'chamarcha. It specifies an example. So klal prat, and b'klal, el mashab prat. Maybe I would say that, as we said before, if you have a rule and a general rule and then details, it's only the details that count. So maybe only your ox and donkey have to rest on Shabbos, not your other animals. All right, so they say this is an obvious response, right? That if then there's a closing general rule as well. Then you would say it's like those things that are detailed, not just those specific things that are detailed, but it's anything that shares the characteristics. So just as the shor and chamor are living things, so that's the rule that is being established here. Any living thing has to rest on Shabbos that you own. So just like we did before, why are you assuming that that's the important part of the specific details? Maybe the only animals that have to rest are those that are like shor and chamor, in that their carcass makes you tame whether you touch it or carry it, right? Maybe those are the only kinds of animals that have to rest on Shabbos. So like not birds, slow, but birds don't have that rule. Amre, so they answered him, then you could only, this is exactly what we just had earlier. Then the Torah would have to write only one example, shor or chamor. So hey niktav rachman. So we ask the same thing. Well, which one? Because rachman shor, if you would only write shor havamina karvul davim in shena karvul davim lo. Maybe if the Torah only wrote the detail of shor, you would think, what were we talking about? Animals which can be sacrificed on the altar. So the Torah also adds chamor, which can't be offered on the altar. And now we know that the important detail is that they're living things. Because what about only writing chamor? Maybe the unique thing about a chamor that we're to apply is only things that are in the category of bechor, like a chamor is. So Chasar Rahmana Shor. So therefore the Torah adds Shor, and now we have both Shor and Chamar, and so the available option then is things that are like a Shor and a Chamar in that they are living, but then that would include birds, right? One second. No. So now we're back to the assumption that maybe it's not living things that are being included. It's a narrow category, like Shor and Chamor, of things that make you tame b'magom masa, not birds. So maybe birds are not included in the Shabbos resting. Ella, so the Gemara answers v'chol b'hem tcharibuyahu, by saying at the end, and this was kind of obvious, right? The Torah says, who should rest on Shabbos? You and your animal and your family and your animals, all of your animals. So all that includes any living being. Okay. So that seems reasonable, but the Gemara is going to poke a hole in that as well. Does kol always mean to include? Is it always including things? We here's an example of Maser Sheni, which where the word kol is not used as an including phrase; it's used as a limiting phrase. Tanya. So Maser Sheni is the Maser the type that you have to take to your shalayim to consume there. And you can take the money, you can redeem it with money and take the money to your shalayim and spend it, and Torah says, on whatever you want. Whatever you want. Klal, that's a generalization. That's including anything. And then it details, right? What can you buy? Cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, prat. So there it's specifying details. And then it winds up by saying, and everything, whatever you want. That's a generalization. So now we have klal prat klal. You have the construction of a rule, details, followed by a summarizing rule. Yes, and then so then the rule is we include things that are like those which are detailed, which are like the specific details. Ma prat mefarash pri mi pri v'gidulei karka. So what was included? By kar, tzon, yain, shechar. Only things that are food that is pre, fruit from fruit, meaning like it's this one generation produces the next generation. So this is like living things, right? Cattle, they're born from mothers, and fruit, where the seed of one fruit provides for the next generation of trees, or trees or wheat, whatever. So one second. So we see that. So how is kol being used here? As a klal, right? So there's two separate possibilities here, two separate things that we're using kol for. One is as a general rule, like in the case of Maser Sheni, but we use it in a different way, talking about resting on Shabbos, where kol was not the general rule; it was including something, in a class. Right, so these are kind of two separate uses of kol. So I'm going to say b'chol kol revuya. Yeah, you can use it. No, bichol is generalization, and kol is an inclusion. Okay, ibrai sema. So you can use kol in these two different ways, but it's depends how it's written. If it's written with the what do you call that? Bichol. With the preposition, I think, right? If it's used with the preposition, then it's one way, and if it's just used alone, kol, everything, then it's a generalization. You buy sema, or you can answer kol nami klalahu. Really, everything you always use kol as a klal as well. Mihu Hai Kol Dahacha Rubuyahu. But this is an exception when we come to the Shabbos and the Ten Commandments. Midahavale Lamichtav Uvahemtecha Kiduchsi B'dibros Harishanos, because we already have an example of how you didn't have to say Kol Behemtecha, all of your animals. You could say your animals, like where it says that in the first set of 10 Commandments. Because of the Kol Behemtecha, Shmamina Rubuya. So since that whole word is unnecessary, then we're going to use it as a including term and not as a generalization term. Okay, that's a little technical. Okay. So Hashad was called Rubuyahu. Now that you've agreed that the word kol is to include things. So what do we use it for? We use it to include birds and who has to rest on Shabbos. So like now that you've included everything with the word kol, what do you need all these examples for? Right? What do you need behemtecha? And why do you need shor v'chamor? Like you already know from kol that every living thing is included. Amrei, so you answer shor lagmure shor lachasima. Oh, remember how we wanted to apply what we knew about Shabbos, that it's all kinds of animals. Now we're going to apply it to all those other cases. So shor, it's written to link to chasima. Like now it's not even necessary there. So the only reason the Torah is writing shor when it comes to Shabbos in the Ten Commandments is to link it to the rule about not muzzling your ox. It's not just your ox, just like in the Ten Commandments on Shabbos, it's any animal. Chamor lagmure, chamor leprika. And the extra word chamor in the Ten Commandments links to chamor in the mitzvah of helping to unload, right? So it's not just a donkey. It just like on Shabbos, it's not just donkey, it's any animal. And the word behemtecha, it links to the kilayim law. That doesn't only apply. So then, if we're getting it from Shabbos, maybe not only a donkey and not only two different kinds of animals can't plow together, but maybe a man and an animal can't plow together, right? Because men are included in Shabbos as well, right? But the Mishnah says specifically that a man can help an animal pull a plow. We in the Papa family know the explanation. What do I mean by the Papa people? Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Why he's called a Papa person, I'm not sure. Papunia. Okay. According to Rashi, he lived in Papunia, so he's making a pun of his own name. But anyway, Rav Acha bar Yaakov answers this question. Amar Kra, so that your servants can rest like you. Lahanacha hikashtiv. By saying Laman Yanuach, it's saying that what all these what we're going to apply from Shabbos to other cases, resting things, right? Things that rest, not Lola Davar Acher, but not linking people to animals regarding where your servant is linked to an animal only about Shabbos, right? That you both have to rest on Shabbos, but only with regarding to resting, but a mitzvah, linking it to a mitzvah that applies to a person being involved, that we do not do. So that's why we do not apply the mixing of pulling a plow to people and animals, only to animals and animals. Okay. Okay, I think we'll stop here and David will pick up tomorrow.
Yashikor, thank you.
Okay, bye.